So, did they get it right with these three episodes? Well, I think for the most part, yes, although there were a few clunky moments, and it may be a little disappointing if you're a hardcore fan of the MCU because you may have seen some chunks of this before, which they're doing for flashback scenes. So it's a little mixed, but it is more mixed positive than negative. You didn't see Hawkeye. They did catch you up with Maya and her basic dilemma of dealing with Kingpin and his vast army of goons. So even though Kingpin is really her main antagonist for the whole story, we're really getting more on her background, her family, her Native American traditions, etc., etc., etc. And although that sounds boring, they actually found a very inventive way to weave all these elements together. A sort of half crime noir story, but also surprisingly very nice kind of character study. And yes, Daredevil does show up. We do get a lot with Kingpin, more or less what trailer promised. I will say though that the first episode was really outstanding because it began in such a weird and interesting fashion, and I wish they continued that vein a little bit longer, but then it slips back into the present day in a kind of weird crime story. So we're getting Echo's origin, more or less, in the first couple episodes, as well as being introduced to her family and their dynamics. So overall, fairly strong episodes, though I would say the first episode kind of maxed out on all fronts. A lot of action, a lot of emotion, very well drawn characters. However, because so many good things were in the first episode, the other two episodes kind of pale by comparison. They weren't bad by any means, but first one was really the most energetic and the one that I felt really showed the promise of the entire series. And this thing does not have that many episodes, so they don't waste too much time, which I appreciate. Again, I didn't mind Hawkeye, I actually liked quite a lot, but you could definitely tell they were needlessly stretching out moments, just had some comedy bits or some moments that they just kept elongating much longer than they had to. And some of the twists at the end with Kingpin where we saw them coming, why didn't they just speed it up? Don't know. So Echo is much, much better paced than Hawkeye, and it is much more focused. Again, I didn't hate Kate Bishop, but I do think she was sometimes a little too distracting. So I understand why they had her in there. It does have a payoff if you see the Marvels, but definitely it's a better improvement here to just be so focused on Echo and her struggle. So first three episodes are very, very promising. I think I can predict the ending fairly well. I don't have to see the ending, but I think for what they set up, it'll be very, very interesting to see where they're going to keep going with this. And it is a very, very solid introduction to Daredevil. So it gives you a lot of hope they're going to maintain this kind of R-rated feeling with Daredevil and not go too far down the road with very goofy MCU humor. There are a few jokes here, and some of them didn't land for me, but overall it wasn't too distracting. So I'm going to give this a very strong 7.75, far above average. It's not nightmarishly bad like She-Hulk. It's not totally 10 out of 10, but fairly strong episode. It is perhaps not as bloody or even as sexual as I wanted. It's not Game of Thrones. It's still fairly tame for the MCU, but again, it is a huge improvement from their I guess more childish content, and so it's much much more consistently adult and consistently well written.